welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today we're here to do my December 2024 wrap up. The very last wrap up that I'm gonna do for 2024, which is sad because I definitely fell off the wrap up train, but that's okay. I'm here to do wrap ups once more. You'll see my face a lot more in 2025, I promise. Today we're going to talk about the books that I read in December from my lowest rated to my highest rated. And honestly guys, it was a really good reading month. My lowest rated book was a 3.5. I had 2 5-star reads. I was just in the Christmas reading spirit. So without further ado, let's just jump into the books that I read. My lowest rated book was Mixed Signals by B.K. Borison. I gave this a 3.5. This book follows Layla, who is the baker at Lovelight Farms, and Caleb, a former deputy who is now a substitute teacher. And these two are having trouble in the dating world. Nobody that they go out on dates with really seems to stick or to want them. And so because they're both going through this issue together, they're like, let's fake date with the intention of giving each other feedback on what we're like during these dates. It was really cute, but it felt a little bit forced. And what was also really weird was Layla has known Caleb for forever, and it is like a light switch when she's like, I've known this guy forever. All of a sudden, I think he's really hot. And that was just not quite believable to my silly little brain. But all of that said, I still had a really good time with this book. I love the way that she writes characters. I love the way that she introduces and works through conflict. I like the way that these two characters showed up for each other. I also think I did myself a tiny bit of disservice because this is the summer book and I read it in the middle of December, so the vibes weren't quite there, but I still really enjoyed this and I can't wait to read Business Casual, and then I also can't wait for her new book to come out in February. I also gave Frederick Bachman's The Answer Is No a 4-star. This book was really fun, very quirky, with a lot to say on what it is to be a human, as is usual for Frederick Bachman. It was a 4-star because honestly, it was so short, and in the time frame that we had to read the book, everything just felt a little bit exaggerated and larger than life, and that's okay. 4 stars is great for a novella that you listen to in an hour. Without saying too much about the book, we're following a main character who really just wants to be introverted. He wants to order his pad thai, have it left at his doorstep, pick it up, go inside, play video games, and not really communicate with the outside world. But one day, the board of directors of his apartment knocks on his door and is like, did you leave a frying pan by the recycling bin? Because that's not allowed. Then the next day they come back and they're like, now there's 2 frying pans in front of the recycling bin and something must be done about it because it's not allowed. And he's like, hey, it wasn't even me. He gives a suggestion. Because he gives a suggestion, he all of a sudden is put in charge of finding the culprits of the people who are leaving the frying pans in front of the recycling bin. This book had a lot to say about just community, connections, neighbors, taking responsibility for things and listening to people who have ideas. It was fun, and in less than an hour, Frederick Bachman made me cry because that's just what he does best. I really recommend this. If you need a short book to fill a reading goal, this is a great one because not only are you going to read it, you're going to get something out of it, and hand me anything Frederick Bachman writes and I will be content. Moving into the 4.5 zone, the first book that we had was The Kingdom of Copper. This is book 2 in the Daevabad trilogy, which we have been reading over at the Magical Menagerie, which is my Patreon and book club. And overall, I had a really fun time with this book. It is long and it felt a little bit too long in spots, hence the 4.5, but this was just as magical as the first one. We're following the same trio of characters we started following in book 1, which was the City of Brass. So we follow Nari and Dara and Ali through political scheming, through romance, through discovering magic. Honestly, she just creates such magical worlds. This is everything that you want out of epic fantasy, but we're changing the setting from your typical medieval English-inspired fantasy, and we're dropping our characters in a Middle Eastern Egyptian-inspired location instead. The way that this book ended made me so excited to get to the Empire of Gold, which I am reading in the month of January, and I'm very excited about it, / nervous, because again, this book is long and the next one is even longer. But all that said, S.A. Chakraborty has just done a fantastic job creating such a lush and epic landscape in the storyline, and I can't wait to get to it. If you are reading this series, just know that there is a 5-year time jump between the end of book 1 and the beginning of book 2, which is a little bit jarring at first, but you fall right back into place where you need to be. Another book I gave a 4.5 to is I Made It Out of Clay by Beth Candor. This book is following Eve Goodman, who is really struggling in life. She turns 40 the following weekend. Her sister is getting married. She doesn't have a date to her sister's wedding. Things are not going great at work and she's worried about getting laid off. Her best friends are feeling distant. And in addition to all of this, she is still suffering from the loss of her father, who died unexpectedly a year ago. This book had so much to say about grief and how isolating grief is. Eve goes through most of the book too scared to turn her phone on and connect with other people, which everybody gives her such a hard time about, but I can totally understand where she's coming from. I think this book also had a lot to say about empathy and about being there and supporting people even when they aren't good at communicating what they need from you. In addition to just covering some really heavy topics, this book also had some really funny moments. Eve has a neighbor nicknamed in her own brain, Hot Josh, who definitely feels like Roy Kent. The book kind of comes to a head where she is so desperate to have a date to her sister's wedding that she creates a golem, which is a mud monster in Jewish culture, and things escalate from there. I don't want to say too much more about it. It probably sounds like there's so much going on in this book, and there is, but it all ties together and it has a lot to say. I'm not going to say why I gave it a 4.5 in the video because I feel like that kind of gives a spoiler, but if you want to chat about it, I am more than happy to, but just know I highly recommend this book and I will continue to read everything that Beth Kander publishes. Another book I gave 4.5 to is the only Christmas book that I read and enjoyed this year. What is wrong with me and Christmas books? I'll never know. But the book that I gave a 4.5 to is The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year by Allie Carter. This book was so much fun. It had its flaws. It had things that I could sit here and complain about, but if we're just going off of vibes, I had a really, really good time with this. In this book, we are following Maggie and Ethan, who are both mystery thriller authors, though they have their own vibe of the kind of mystery and thrillers that they write about. They're invited to spend Christmas at the home of their biggest fan, who turns out to be none other than Eleanor Ashley. If Agatha Christie were still alive, that's the kind of vibe that I got from her. So these two authors are spending Christmas at this huge manor with Eleanor Ashley, as well as a lot of her family and friends. Eleanor Ashley goes missing shortly after the beginning of this novel, and it is a whodunit, mystery, clue, Knives Out rom-com. So there's a lot going on in this book, but I promise it is fun. It is enjoyable from start to finish. I felt like there were some plot holes. There were some things that could have used some more fleshing out, but in the end, I didn't really care. That's what I get for having cats. I just had a really good time with this, and I kind of hope that she'll continue to write more mysteries following Maggie and Ethan because I feel like it left it open to do so, and I had a lot of fun. All right, let's get into my 5-star reads. Oh my gosh. The first 5-star that I want to talk about is Heartless by Elsie Silver. Yes, this is coming from me. I gave Flawless a 3.5. I made fun of Chestnut Springs for the longest time and said that I wasn't going to read it, and here I am giving the second book a 5-star. This book follows Cade and Willa. Cade is a single dad running a ranch pretty much solo, and he desperately needs a nanny for his young son. We have Summer from the first book, Flawless, reach out to her best friend and be like, hey, I think you would be a really good fit to be a nanny for my soon-to-be brother-in-law, Cade. And Cade and Willa's romance is everything. It is an age gap romance, and I'm just here to say I'm here for an age gap romance. It was a really good time. Cade is the kind of grumpy that I like, where at first he comes off very just gruff, but underneath of it, he is a sweetheart. He is a teddy bear, and he has a sense of humor. And then Willa is probably one of my favorite romance female main characters I've ever read about. She's feisty. She's a firecracker. She doesn't change who she is just to impress her employer or the man who she's interested in, which in this case happens to be both. This book is spicy, so if you are not somebody that likes spice, this is one to skip, because even though you can skip the spicy chapters, it is in their head a lot. I don't mind spice in my books, and so I had a really good time with that. And I just really, really liked their dynamic, as well as the dynamic with Cade's son and all of the Eaton family. This book has everything that you love about a romance series that follows a family. But honestly, the heart and soul of this book is Cade and Willa and their dynamic together. I just loved them. I loved that she wasn't afraid to challenge Cade when she needed to, and I loved that Cade was willing to listen. And even though he is a very strong character and set in his ways, he's willing to bend when he realizes that he's wrong. There are some scenes in this book that just live in my brain rent free, and I can't wait to continue in Chestnut Springs. Wow, I could keep talking about this book for forever. Let's talk about Blood Over Brighthaven, because this was my favorite book of the month. It also happened to be our Patreon buddy read and book club pick, and wow, me and my patrons could not have picked a better book for us to discuss, because this book has so much to talk about. I'm probably just gonna word vomit, and I need to make it all make sense. But in this book, we're following Siona, who has dreamed her entire life of becoming the first female high mage, and she does it. She passes the test with flying colors, and she becomes the first female high mage. So even though she has just won this position of very distinguished honor. The people that she's working with are very quick to dismiss her. I kind of got a magical lessons in chemistry vibe, and even if you didn't like lessons in chemistry, don't let that sway you from the book. Just the whole like sexism in the workplace vibe. Very, very apparent here. Everybody that works in the High Mage Council has an assistant, and they are not quick to give her her own assistant, and instead they're like, you can have the janitor as your assistant. And it's supposed to be a joke, but she's like, fine, I will have the janitor for my assistant, and we're gonna do great things. The janitor is of another race called the Quinn, and the Quinn actually came into this city by crossing over a frozen lake, avoiding this magical plague called the Blight. And when they get into the city, life doesn't become easy for them. They are very much working class. They are looked down on. They are thought to be stupid and savage. But Siona and the janitor, Tommy, they form a very cool relationship where they definitely push each other to see outside of the box. And through working together, they realize that there is so much more darkness in the magic that runs the city than they ever could have thought possible. That is like scratching the surface. This book has so much to say just as far as the story goes, but there are so many lessons, not in a preachy way, but there are so many lessons that you could take out of this book and apply to our world, our politics, ourselves as individuals, and I could not say more good things about this book. Wow. I need somebody to put the Sword of Kaigen magically into my hands right now, because I need to read everything this woman ever writes in my life. If you haven't read Blood Over Brighthaven, please read it. It's a standalone, so it's not a big commitment, and you will be shocked. You will be amazed. You will cry. You will laugh. You will want to throw things across the room and potentially at other people. And wow, this was a good book. And that wraps up everything that I read in the month of December. It was a fantastic reading month. I was so motivated to just sit down and enjoy a book, which I hadn't felt that in a long time. And I hope that I can carry that over into the new year. But if you watched all the way to the end of my December wrap up, why don't you leave me a fire emoji? Because I feel like that is very applicable to Blood Over Brighthaven. I hope you guys finished your 2024 on an amazing note, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye guys.